Hello, Ambah here with a companion tutorial for the Knitterati patterns. This is for the optional embroidery component. The patterns are standalone, you don't need to embroider if you prefer a staple piece for your wardrobe, or if you want to add that extra flair with either one of the provided templates or your own design, then this is the how-to for how to embroider onto your knitwear. Several years ago, I worked with a graphic designer to create these motifs for merch that I'd created, including t-shirts. And I've used that on quite a few items, including knitwear, pullovers, t-shirts, and thought that it would be a fun additional component to add to a knitting project. And created the patterns to accompany them. So this is the cardigan where I've embroidered on the back using the Knitterati symbol. I also used the Knit Love symbol on the sleeve, so I could have a heart on the sleeve. The tutorial will show me as I work through the process of embroidering, so there's a little bit of trial and error in there as I discover along the way. But you can see on this particular one I've used several colours, including a glittery yarn there. These are fingering weight yarns and a DK weight as well. And then for the pullover, after I used the glittery yarn on the cardigan, I decided to use a metallic yarn here. This is a very fine, probably equivalent to a cobweb thread of metallic yarn. And I kept it fine, so it's quite a subtle version. And also I omitted the needle part, the triangle needle part that is included on this design, mainly because of how fine the yarn was. It didn't work as well. I tried a few things, but it didn't really have the impact that I wanted to, so I decided to keep it simpler. And really, you can do whatever you want with the embroidery. Find drawings, designs, motifs, anything that appeals to you. The pattern does include the two templates for you to play with, but it's fun to explore other things as well. For example, recently I offered to knit my partner a hat for his birthday and asked what he wanted, and he requested flames. And I considered a few colour work, stranded knitting options. I had a few ideas that I was playing with, and then it occurred to me that it would be a perfect embroidery project. So it's the same technique as I'm showing for how I worked this, which is essentially chain stitch, and also the materials used so that you can get the template onto your design and embroider without needing an embroidery hoop. So it's good fun. So here's a tutorial to get you started on embroidering your knits. The embroidery. I decided to use my swatch to practice and have a go and see what I liked. I decided to use fingering weight yarn for mine. I knew I wanted the lines to be fairly fine. It's quite a detailed image and I didn't want it to be too thick. I haven't actually tried swatching with a heavier weight yarn, but you certainly could do that when you're deciding what to use for your project. So I just used my garment swatch as a test. And then I purchased these needles specifically because I have a sharp point, and I knew I would need a sharp point to get through the paper stabilizer that I printed my design onto. So I'll be using that again. And then I used this product. There'd be a few varieties of the same thing available. The water-soluble paper stabilizer for embroidery. It's fantastic, it's like magic. And the first time with this one, I just used a fabric Sharpie and traced it onto the stabilizer, and then I thought I'd try printing it for these ones, which I did successfully on my at-home printer, so it was pretty straightforward to do. I would suggest that you print it on regular paper first to make sure you're happy with the size, and then if you want to enlarge or reduce before printing it out on this stabilizer. I printed a small one for the heart. It's actually a bit smaller than that one. I may go and print that a little bit larger because I do like that size. Another option would be when I traced it, I had had it up on my tablet, and then I could make it the size I wanted, and I just traced it using that. Or you could print it onto regular paper and then trace through. It's quite transparent. And then cut around the shape, or you could leave it whole, I suppose. I just cut around so that I could use those little bits for something else later if I wanted to. And these are available, there are quite a few stores I've seen on Etsy, and I guess in other places it's probably a common embroidery thing. You can get pre-printed versions of this with a lot of other designs. Also available through Etsy and probably plenty of other online places that stock embroidery supplies. You can get them pre-printed with a bunch of designs. So if this is not a design for you, there's plenty of other options out there. Or I love the idea of just covering a garment with lots of small designs gradually over time, perhaps as a memorial piece. You know, each time you have an adventure, you add a new symbol of that adventure. Something like that could be fun to do. For starters, I'll start with this. I'm going to have this on the front of my pullover and on the back of my cardigan. So I was inspired because I had t-shirts printed with this design and I loved wearing them, and I thought, oh, it'd be really cool to do it on knitwear. And that was how I decided to create these patterns. Of course, it could be on any knitwear. It doesn't have to be these specific patterns. And I'm going to put it on the back of the cardigan, and also this heart I want on my sleeve. I want a heart on my sleeve. So that's going to be something like that on my sleeve. Yeah, so the cardigan will have 2 and the pullover will have 1, and then maybe I'll continue to add them. So what I'll do is cut around here and stick it onto the cardigan. I think I might undo the button so it's nice and flat. And get started. So I've cut it out and I'll peel that off. And it's reasonably thin. However, it's firm enough that it provides quite a bit of stability. I think that's about centered. So I found with this one I didn't need an embroidery hoop. You may want that. It doesn't suggest that in the instructions on the packet. And then the first thing to do is think about how you want that to flow. With the heart, I decided to do the outline all in one go. I may have adjusted yarn along the way. With this one, now looking at it, I may even use thicker yarn for the needles to distinguish those. I might even use a different colour and a DK weight yarn, and perhaps even a different colour for those rays. Initially I thought I would do it all pink. Now I'm not certain. It does look kind of cool black as well, but I like the idea of a colour. I think that's a bit more fun. So yes, I'm going to think a bit about yarn and also how I want to work the design. So I'll certainly do the hand in a single outline, and then the ball, probably do the hand first and the ball, and then work the inside lines. Then the symbols. So to get started, I am going to thread my needle. I only have a tiny bit on that's left over from the last time, so I'll just use a little bit more here. As I mentioned, I purchased these needles because of the sharp point. You need something sharper than a regular darning needle that you would use for weaving in ends to poke through that embroidery sheet. I'll start down here. Poke the needle through. I'll just leave a tail on the wrong wrong side, and I'll weave that in later. And I'm just doing a simple chain stitch for this. So I kind of form the loop, push the needle through and then up to where I want that stitch, just a few millimeters, and pull, ensuring that that is coming through the center of the loop. That's stitch one. So you can make those as long or short as you like. I think it is a good idea to practice beforehand to see what you might like. Now this little bit here, I think I will, what will I do? I'll come up here. So you pull that up through the center, and then the next stitch you'll bring back through the center of that loop. So you're creating the hold in the stitch, and keep repeating, pulling that through, making sure that the loop is around the yarn. Pop the needle back in the center top of that loop, and away you go. And follow the line. So I'll come back around, finish here, think about what I want to do here. I might just do a little stitch later, or even just a couple on this side. I may even come back and finish there and then come down and around. Yeah, that's what I'll do there. I'll keep you posted. I don't have a hugely long tail on my yarn. I probably could have had it a bit longer, but I'll just keep stopping and rethreading as I go along. Okay, I've done the outline of the hand. I ended up coming around down here and then back under. Maybe I'll do that little stitch there too. And I decided to use a different colour for the little stitch symbols and slightly different stitches to the chain stitch. So with this one, I came up in the centre, forming a cross, and kept doing that. So I came up through the centre, sewed to the end, and then back into the centre, and then pushed the needle through to the other section. Although in this case, I'm going to go back through the centre and come up to the bottom of this diamond. So they're just single stitches rather than the chains, to be a little bit finer. And I'll do similar here. So I'll come in here and then come up at the top. Come in here and let's see, come back down to this bottom point. Don't catch that yarn. I'll come up to the side again and up to the top. I'm not an embroiderer, so this is me just making it up as I go along. And up to this U, I'll do a series of smaller stitches to go around that U shape. That stands out nicely against the pink. I thought it would get a bit confused if I did it all the same shade of pink. I might use this magenta for the yarn ball, and I found some glittery thread for here, and still deciding what to do for those needles. I thought I'd share an in-progress update, show you how it's looking. I did end up using different colours, and I have a fourth colour which will be DK weight that I'll use for the needles. I'm going to use a kind of green colour for those. I found a metallic thread which I thought looks fabulous for the bursts there, the star bursts. And I did initially do pink on this line here, and then the ball within that, but it didn't look quite right. So I undid this section of pink and magenta and just redid it so the ball's sort of sitting over like it is over here, and that looks better to me. So there's always room to adjust according to what you like. So yes, I'll see how the DK weight looks for a thicker part here for the sticks, and then onto the sleeve. The DK weight's working really well. I thought I'd just stop and show a couple of points in this. So I started with the chain here. I'll show you here what I did, and then the chain stitch all down along. I just kind of wove the yarn behind the work and popped out over here. And now for this final point, I'm just going to do one long stitch there for the point, so it's not as wide as the chain stitch, and then bring the needle back up to this edge of the needle tip and show you what I did there. And then I'll continue up for those other 3 needles. And yeah, I found it worked really well to do the hand first, and then I worked the details inside, and then the sun rays or light rays coming out. So I think I'll do one more chain here and then do the point. So do the point, and then I'll bring that needle up under to here. There, a pointy knitting needle. And so to get started with this, I did a chain loop, a sort of a biggish one right to the other side. With the DK weight yarn, it's nice and thick, so I was able to make that work. And then I came in under, down at the end, and then up, and I actually came up through the middle of that loop. Pull that through, and that gives, just loosen that off slightly, a nice knobbly end to the knitting needle. And then I just continue the chain stitch straight down. I've finished the 2 pieces that I'm going to embroider for now. Maybe I'll continue to add to this, but this is part 1. And now for the fun bit. I filled up a bowl with water. You can see my reflection in that. And all that has to happen now is a little soaking to remove the dissolvable embroidery paper, so stabilizer, and that happens pretty readily. Once I've done that, I've already blocked this piece, so I won't soak the whole thing again. But you can see that's already dissolving, and you can see the knitwear revealed. Let's have a look at the sleeve. So it's getting a bit jelly-like while it dissolves. Just a little agitation, nothing too... I'm pretty sure if I just left it there for a few minutes and came back, it would be pretty much done anyway. And it's like magic. So I'll wring this out with a towel and set it out on my blocking things and show you when it's dry. Okay, it's all dry now. However, I have removed the green needles. I decided that it looked too heavy, it kind of didn't work. And I've been debating a few different colour options, like something in the pink realm, rust, and I think I finally come to the conclusion that a very light, subtle colour will be perfect for that to really help bring the hand forward. And you can see a slight green mark remains where the green stitches were. It was a bit of a pain to undo them, but I haven't woven in the ends yet, so that's probably a good thing to leave until the end in case you do want to change anything. And yeah, so I just spent a bit of time unpicking. I think it's worth it. And I have this sheet where I cut out the heart, and I thought I'll reuse that part. I had slightly wet hands, and this stuff is very water soluble, I've discovered, so make sure your hands are nice and dry when you're using it. So I just used the other one I'd printed out and quickly traced over. So now my next step will be to align that onto my existing. I did find with this, I placed it and I wasn't quite happy with where it was, so I pulled it off and restuck it, and that worked pretty well. So it is reasonably forgiving, but first I'll chop around before I do that. And finished. I used that lighter pink for the needles and really love that impact. I think it was a good idea to unpick that green, even though it was a bit painful. Now it looks right to me, and I've added on my little heart. And I've since embroidered the metallic version that you saw at the start. This is also chain stitch, but very small stitches due to the very fine metallic yarn thread. And this hat was also using a fingering weight yarn. I used 3 rows of colour to get that effect. Hopefully I've inspired you to embroider your knits. Thanks for watching.